Well, hello again. It's hard to believe we're this far into the semester already. It seems like it just started. And this week introduces a small topic related to the use of technology in the classroom, but a very important one. And it shows up early in the class because it is foundational to teachers being able to do the best job possible using technology in their practice. And I will tell you right now that when you think about the best ways to use technology in the classroom, what you should immediately think about are what are the ways people are using technology outside the classroom in the real world. And so I want to address that a little bit as we investigate how you might use technology to help you build community. Community between you and your students, between your students and other people in the community, between parents and you. So anybody who has an interest or a stake in what goes on in the classroom, technology can be used to help support your efforts to bring those people together into the learning community. And as I mentioned, I think the best way to think about technology in the classroom is to consider how is it being used outside the classroom. And I have to say, I've been around long enough to where I've had many different kind of iterations of what dominated the use of technology in the real world. So when I first started investigating ways to use technology in my own classroom, I was only using computers as a word processing program, primarily. I also used a computer to work on spreadsheets to keep track of some information like that. And I used technology to manage a real rudimentary calendar for myself. And then also because I've always seemed to be a student in school, going all the way back to the beginning of my work as a teacher, I used technology a little bit for statistics and statistical analysis. And that was it. And you'll notice that what all of those have in common is that they didn't require the use of any online resources for me to be able to use a computer. And that's because there weren't online resources back when I started to use a computer. So when I looked at how my students use technology, I was primarily looking at it as a tool that might be able to help them organize the experiences that I already had planned for them. So I didn't really look at how technology what role it might play in a lesson. It was just a tool that I would support for them to be able to succeed in the class and all of that. Well, then the internet happened. Plug the computer in, and this is still before the World Wide Web, but the internet existed. And what I mean by World Wide Web is if you think about a web browser like Chrome or Safari, those are interfaces for communicating over the internet. And communicating back and forth, communicating images and sounds and movies and that kind of thing. But before those browsers became available or even invented, computers could still talk to each other. It just looked very different. And the ways that I used the computer, once I could plug it in, there were two important ways that I used it. I used it as a means of communicating with the library at the school where I was a student. And I also used it in my classroom as a science teacher because there were things called bulletin boards, which I'm sure you're familiar with. They're kind of like message boards in a way. And back again, before the web, there was a message board that was called Ask a Scientist. And it was something where you could type in a question to a particular kind of scientist, and then you would send it out over the message board, and you'd wait for a scientist to respond. And so I had one of those computers. I had a computer hooked up in my science classroom. And whenever there was a question that I didn't know the answer to, or that I wasn't sure about, or that I wanted my students to investigate on their own, then they always had the opportunity to go and ask an expert in the field to explain something to them. So that was called Ask a Scientist. So I used that in my life outside school to do research, and then I used it in the classroom in the same way. So that was before the World Wide Web. Well, after the World Wide Web that was invented and was created, that's when I really started to use email a lot. It was interesting to consider life before email, because I had one, and I was slow to think that email was just going to become just the standard way to communicate with other people. And I found that fascinating. I had a phone in my school office, in my office at school. I worked in a lab at a university campus, and I had a phone there in case somebody needed to get a hold of me. I certainly didn't have a phone in my pocket, but communicating was synchronous. That is, it was always real time. But then with the web came an easy way to email, an easy way to look up information, and as the web evolved, an easy way to create information that became part of the information network. And so did other means of communicating, with video conferencing and really bulletin boards that became really elaborate. And I mean things like Facebook, social media. A lot of social media is based on those early bulletin board kind of programs where people would post something and then other people could respond to the post. And so all of that was something that I just watched blossom around me. I watched it blossom in my life outside of school. And before I left the science classroom to be a university teacher, I never actually really used social media that much. And to be honest with you, I was really surprised that social media became, in many ways, became one of the most dominant uses of technology in the real world. And that's actually why I'm talking about this right now, because building community involves communicating, and it involves communicating among and between different people, and that's certainly what social media is all about. It's about communication. So I didn't see it coming. Why? Probably because in my own life, because I was a little older, I think, and because I didn't use technology, I didn't use computers to communicate during times of my life when it was really important to get a hold of people or to meet and connect with people. I think dating apps are an amazing idea. You know, if you think about it, the probability of meeting somebody who's more like-minded with you is probably much greater than just sort of randomly running into somebody at a bar or at some other kind of social event. So I probably would have dove into that kind of technology use when I was younger, but I just didn't see it. I just didn't see it happening. But here we are. Here we are. So I did some research on why is social media, why has it become a dominant technology in the world, outside school? And I did my research very simply, and that is I asked AI. I just asked AI the question, why is social media such a dominant form of technology used today? And here are the 10 things that AI spit out, and I think they're really good. The first one is to make human connection and communication, obviously. The second is that it's very convenient and very accessible, particularly since you're walking around with a computer in your pocket that you can interface with these social media programs just anytime you want, for essentially. Also, being part of a social media sort of experience is socially validating and allows you to engage with the society around you. It allows you to share information. It allows you to express yourself, who you are, and also, of course, who you want to be. It's just flat out entertaining. I mean, I cannot tell you how many TikTok rabbit holes I've been on ever since that app showed up on my phone. My goodness. But a lot of it is very entertaining. I'm very entertained by TikTok and Reddit and other kind of social media applications that allow people to post stuff that are meaningful to me, and then also just to look at how other people respond to it. There are a lot of clever people out there, I tell you what. Funny too. Also, people use social media like LinkedIn for networking opportunities, and that can be really important. And I understand that that is a common way to communicate and connect regarding possible job opportunities. Thankfully, I haven't had to worry about that for a while, so I don't know a lot about that. But social media also provides a sense of community. It certainly provides an opportunity to market and to create businesses or support businesses or market businesses. And that's certainly used all the time. And finally, number 10, I really like this one because it definitely speaks to me, and that's a fear of missing out. And I don't really have a fear of missing out on sort of what's going on in the world socially, but sometimes I have a fear of missing out on what kind of what's happening in news stories that are important to me and that I'm following. And so I find myself looking at some social media sites more than regular because I really want to know. I don't want to miss out on something important related to news, like related to the presidential race. That's important to me. What's going on in the field of education is important to me. What's going on with my fantasy football team this week is really important to me. And let me tell you, you got to keep up with that. Otherwise you're just not gonna be successful. So those are all reasons why people use technology, why they use social media. And so I'm asking you to consider how you might use technology tools, including social media, and maybe especially social media, to help you build community as a teacher between you and your students and parents and other stakeholders. And one thing that I'm going to have you do is consider or reflect upon what is a sense of community. How does somebody feel as if they're in a community? And what can you do to help somebody feel like they're a part of a community? So, and there are 4 areas that I'm going to have you consider and look at and reflect on and create in terms of how you're going to use different technology tools to build community. The first one is membership or affiliation. That is, what can you do to help the people who are part of your community feel like they're part of a group that has a specific identity. So membership is important. Also, influence. The people in the community should feel as if their voice matters, as if their ideas matter, as if their presence matters. And so looking at ways to use technology to do that is what I'm going to ask you to consider. Integration and fulfillment of needs, that is integrating participation in the community to their life, to your students' life and your life, both in the classroom and perhaps even out of the classroom. But to be able to integrate the learning experiences that your students are having with their actual real world life, that's really important. And if you can use the community to help meet the individual needs of students, then that's even better. And finally, the last area I want you to consider, the last area that provides a sense of community among people, is having shared emotional experiences. You know, when I go to a concert, I feel like the people around me, if I'm there long enough, I become a community with the people around me as we experience the concert together and then also react to it in some ways. I feel that way when I go on a tour or something and I'm with this small group for just a couple of hours and we're all experiencing something important together, and that almost immediately provides some level of cohesion and some level of affiliation with that because of that experience, because of that shared experience. So I'm going to ask you to think about ways in which you might use technology to help promote that as far as community building goes too. So the project consists of you developing a page in your portfolio, in your online portfolio, that just provides a plan for how you might use specific tools to help address those 4 areas of community building. And I provide some information, detailed information about community building this week as well. I also provide you with a document that has links to dozens and dozens of tools. Some of them are obvious how they might be used, and some of them are not quite so obvious on how they might be useful to build community. But I'm going to have you think about that, and I'm going to have you create a plan. You do not need to actually create a community or create anything that you might use. For example, you might use Canva like we did in this class. I had you create an About Me presentation using Canva, and which is hopefully you thought that was a really great, easy to use, fun multimedia development tool. And you might do that in your class, because establishing your own identity is a really important part of having a voice in the community and knowing who the others are in the community. So you might say, I will use Canva to help my students create their identities, or at least communicate their identities. But you won't have to actually create a Canva file for that. You'll just have to tell me that that's what you're doing. So this is just going to be a lot of investigating and a lot of thinking. And so you'll develop this plan. And then if you're in the 620 section of the class, I have an article I want you to consider that goes a little bit beyond community, and it has to do with cultural aspects of community building and cultural relevance. And so that's a very relevant thing for you all. So anyway, that's it. That's the week, and I hope you get a lot out of it. And I will be reviewing stuff from weeks 2 and 3 early on this week, and posting any feedback for that in D2L. And meanwhile, onward.